Good evening, everyone. Back at it again with part two of getting closer to God, living with an attitude of gratitude. Let's get back to where we left off. Some tried to hoard the manna until the next day and discovered that it did breed worms. And they also went out on the Sabbath to gather manna, only to discover that there was none on the ground. They had to learn by experience that God knew what he was talking about. These miracles continued day after day, week after week, and year by year, for the duration of the wilderness journey. Only when they arrived in Canaan did the supply of manna end, because the land itself was able to sustain them. For now, they had to learn that God takes care of his people, even when they are co-signed to a barren land. In the evening, God supplied meat to sending quail that flew so close to the ground that they could be caught. These small birds resemble partridges, and even today migrate from southern Israel and Arabia to Central Africa. Egyptian art depicts people catching the birds in handheld nets. Despite all of this, there were times when the complaining of the congregation continued. In an incident that probably happened later, God became very angry because of their demands. Again, the topic was food. This time, it was a desire for meat. As their complaints became louder, Moses became more despondent. He passed their complaints on to the Almighty. So Moses said to the Lord, "Why hast thou been so hard on thy servant? And why have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou hast laid the burden of all this people on me? Was it I who conceived all this people? Was it I who brought them forth, that thou shouldest say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing infant, to the land which thou didst swear to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me, saying, give us meat, that we may eat. I alone am not able to carry all this people, because it is too burdensome for me. So if thou art going to deal thus with me, please kill me at once, if I have found favor in thy sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness." Numbers chapter 11, verse 11 through 15. God gave Moses two replies. First, 70 elders would assist Moses in giving leadership in the desert. Moses had been carrying the burdens of the people all alone. Aaron's help was minimal. Moses was trying to resolve all of the disputes, listening to all the complaints, and representing the needs of the people to God. Little wonder he was exhausted. The second part of the answer was given in anger. Yes, the people would be given meat to eat. In fact, the Lord said, "You shall eat, not 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils, and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who was among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? Then a wind came and brought quail from the sea, and the birds flew within 3 feet of the ground and were caught by the Israelites. So far, so good. The people were hungry for meat, and God gave them their heart's desire. But after hoarding more than they could possibly eat, and then gorging themselves, we read, while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very severe plague. So the name of that place was called, I'm going to butcher this, Kibro the Hathava. I'm going to underline that because I don't know how to say it. Let's continue. Matter of fact, I'm going to do this live. I'm going to look this word up. Hold on. Look this word up real quick. See me real quick. I got my computer right here. I'm about to look this word up real quick and see what's going on. No way, the book just closed on me. All right. How y'all doing? Y'all doing good? All right, let's look this word up real quick. Okay, here it is. Graves of Kibroth Hatava, meaning graves of craving or graves of lust, is a biblical location where Israelites were buried after dying from a plague brought on by their gluttonous craving for meat, rather than gratitude for manna. Interesting. Graves of craving. So this is basically another word for gluttony? Basically? Okay. Let's get back to reading. Because they buried the people who had been greedy. The sin of the people was not that they wanted meat, but that they wanted it more than they wanted the will of God. Let me read that again. The sin of the people was not that they wanted meat, but that they wanted it more than they wanted the will of God. So they're putting food as their idol, basically, is what I'm getting from this. They're putting food, something. Okay. True, they were hungry, but they should not have complained about God. Nor should they have been so greedy once the quail was sent to them. The psalmist comments, they quickly forgot his works. They did not want for his counsel, but craved intensely in the wilderness, and tempted God in the desert. So he gave them their request, but sent a wasting disease among them. When we are selfish in our praying, God just might answer our requests and give us grief besides. There is something even more important than having our desires granted, namely submitting those desires to a God who knows better than we do. As the saying goes, he gives what is best to those who leave the choice with him. Let me read that again. As the saying goes, he gives what is best to those who leave the choice with him. One more time for the people in the back. He gives what is best to those who leave the choice with him. Yep. Neither the manna nor the meat could be hoarded. If kept beyond a day, it bred worms. Let me read that again. I don't think nobody really caught on to that. Neither the manna nor the meat could be hoarded. If kept beyond a day, it bred worms. I talked about this on part 1. You bring bread into the next day, it's going to get molded. You worry about yesterday's bread. Why are you worried about yesterday? Yesterday is gone. It's today now. God did not want them to live so much as a single day without dependence on him. They needed to be kept from the sin of independence, the pride that would make them forget God. By nature, we would prefer to have enough stored up so that we would not have to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. The more we hoard, the more likely we are to drift away from God rather than be nudged in his direction. Without daily spiritual provision, our life will soon become stale and breed worms. I am greatly blessed when I worship with believers on Sunday, but I've also learned that manna cannot easily be carried over to Monday morning. Regardless of how much spiritual food I may digest on Sunday, I have sometimes failed spiritually on Monday because I did not enjoy fresh fellowship with God. Later, a pot of manna was put in the ark as a reminder of God's faithfulness. Generations to come could meditate on the lessons learned by a fledgling nation that needed God so desperately in the wilderness. God wanted them to trust his proning. What was God's hidden agenda in the wilderness? Why did he not supply water even before they became thirsty? Why did he not supply manna before they became hungry? Why did he bring them to the edge of despair before he rescued them? Why, you might ask? As always, God's arrow was aimed at their hearts. He wanted to draw the nation closer to him. He knew that if they didn't have to wait for their blessings, they would soon forget their source. As always, God's arrow was aimed at their hearts. He wanted to draw the nation closer to him. He knew that if they didn't have to wait for their blessings, they would soon forget their source. Here is the divine interpretation. And you shall remember all the way which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 days, or 40 years, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and let you be hungry, and fed you with manna which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live off bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of his mouth of the Lord. Your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you are to know in your heart that the Lord your God was disciplining you just as a man disciplines his son. Therefore you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to fear him. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2 through 6. When I say that God wanted them to trust his pruning, I mean that God was making them into a nation that would bear spiritual fruit. He had planted the seed of faith in their hearts, and he wanted to nurture it. Since both sunshine and rain are needed for a garden, God created the optimum conditions for growth. The experiences of the desert were part of the cultivation, watering, and cutting off of the dead branches. Or we could put it this way. Gardeners know that weeds must be pulled if plants are to grow and eventually bear fruit. The heat and hunger of the desert revealed the weeds that would stifle growth. God already knew what was in their hearts, but these trials would be used like a mirror so that the people would see themselves for what they are. Some would be smitten with conviction and repent. Others would persist in their stubbornness and be judged. Just as iron ore is heated to separate the gold from the dross, so God wanted to purify his people. God wanted to turn up the heat so that the scum might come to the surface. Heat and hunger bring out the best and worst in all of us. We don't know whether these trials achieved their intended result. We are left with the impression that most of the Israelites continued their complaining without developing the faith that is so precious to God. On the other hand, there may have been many who looked to God and did not join in the complaining and unbelief. These trials separated the faithful and the faithless. Moses, Joshua, and Caleb were clear examples of those who believed they would yet see the glorious provision of God. They were at odds with hundreds and thousands of others who were disgruntled, complaining whenever they did not see the bread in their hands or the water in their buckets. As always, there was an invisible line that divided the faithful from the unfaithful, those who drew near from those who turned away. Our example: how should the Israelites have responded to the blight around them? Where can we turn for an example of how to handle the heat and hunger of the wilderness? Christ was in the wilderness for only 40 days, in contrast to the 40 years experienced by the Israelites. But he experienced an intensity of hunger that the ancient people could have never imagined. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he then became hungry. Not a word of complaint passed from his lips. Understandably, the devil tried to exploit Christ's hunger, taunting him. If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread. Christ might have appealed to his rights, As the second member of the Trinity, he had a right to have every one of his desires fulfilled. He had the right to do miracles. But Christ saw the temptation for what it was, an attempt to have a legitimate need met in an illegitimate way. Satan longed to see Christ have a desire fulfilled without submitting that request to the divine will. Christ quoted directly from the same passage in Deuteronomy that gave the reason for Israel's hunger and thirst. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. There are some things in life that are even more important than eating. Indeed, it is better to starve within the will of God than eat and be satisfied apart from it. Ooh, yeah, let me read that again. It is better to starve within the will of God than eat and be satisfied apart from it. Something to think about. Disobedience is a greater curse than hunger. Christ knew that his life was in the hands of his Father, and that was enough to nourish him. From where we can derive this strength to make the right choices, to submit our physical desires to the will of God. We must cultivate a spiritual appetite. There's a hidden manna that makes the manna of the dessert seem tasteless. And as we eat of it, our taste buds will develop. To the Pharisees and anyone else who cared to listen, Christ said, "Truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst." We can submit our physical desires to God because he gives us strength in the inner man. There is a bread that others cannot understand, a bread more precious than the food we so naturally crave. Like Israel, we cannot eat once and be satisfied. We cannot slake our thirst on Sunday and expect it will do for the rest of the week. Just as we must eat regularly to sustain our outer man, so we must eat to keep the inner man in good health. Let every one of us begin our day by feeding on the heavenly manna through meditation of the word of Christ. Once we lose those moments, the rest of our day will crash upon us, and our consciousness of Christ will be disrupted. As F.B. Mayer says, each man needs all that a new day can yield him of God's grace and comfort. It must be daily bread. We must recapture the habit of beginning each day with the manna needed to sustain us. Someone has written, "I met God in the morning when the day was at its best." And camera cut off, but we must recapture the habit of beginning each day with the manna needed to sustain us. Someone has written, "I met God in the morning when the day was at its best, and his presence came like sunrise, like a glory in my breast. All day long his presence lingered. All day long he stayed with me. I sailed in perfect calmness over a troubled sea. Other ships were blown and battered. Other ships were sore distressed. But the winds that seemed to drive them brought to me a perfect rest. Then I thought of other mornings with a keen remorse of mind, when I too had loosed the moorings with his presence left behind. So I think I know the secret learned from many a troubled way. You must seek him in the morning if you want him through the day. Those who are serious about getting closer to God know that yesterday's nourishment will not do for today. The Almighty draws us to himself so that we might be fed again. All right, that was part 2 of the chapter of living with an attitude of gratitude. Thank y'all for listening. Have a good night, everyone. God bless.